Okay, guys, hello. Welcome to this second of the three subgenres of the landscape tradition. Here we have the pastoral tradition. You can see they developed in the during the Renaissance as a revival of the antique interest in the relationship between humankind and nature, as we have been discussing this whole time. Now, the word pastoral, in its original and perhaps most basic sense, refers to a class of poetry developed during Greek antiquity that celebrates the lives of herdsmen or shepherds, for example. This is, in other words, representations of a rural landscape. It's not in the city, it's not urban, it's in the platteland, as we say in Afrikaans, a rural setting. It's a celebration really of the simple life, if I can put it in those terms. People who live in the country where the pace is slower and they enjoy their glass of wine after a long day working in the fields. It's that sort of a character that we find in the pastoral tradition. Perhaps the first painting in the modern era of such a pastoral scene in a landscape is this one by either Titian or Giorgione. It's not exactly sure who, but here we see it's a rural landscape. Here we see the shepherd. Let me just choose a different color actually. The shepherd, there you see him playing on his pipe. Maybe there's the sheep. These guys, they're not in a city. We see the farmhouse there in the background, and then the landscape that sort of stretches on into the horizon. These guys are taking a break, playing the lute, playing the flute, and just a real relaxed scene, idealized scene in the countryside. Note, by the way, as a side note, our ever-present nude figures, women nude amongst dressed men. Even in the landscape tradition, we find this occurrence. Now, okay, this is a very interesting example. Painting by Nicolas Poussin, Et in Arcadiu ego. That's a Latin phrase. It's actually the title of two paintings by Poussin. And in this painting, we see these three shepherds in this, once again, idealized pastoral rural landscape, examining this quite austere and stark tomb. You can see here where their fingers are pointing over here. There's a phrase written, the phrase et in Arcadia ego. Now, Arcadia, I should say, to start with, is means some utopian land, some land that is an ideal, perfect world, better than what we have. The idea of Arcadia developed during Greek antiquity. The Greeks who lived in the polis, of course the Greek word for cities, they to these guys the idea of Arcadia, a utopian land, symbolized some pure rural idyllic life away from the city, somewhere where they can be relaxed, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Now, in this painting, there is a sort of a ambiguity. What exactly is going on? On the one hand, the phrase "et in Arcadia ego" can mean even in Arcadia there am I, which is normally taken to mean to refer to death, right? Even in this perfect, idealized, better than better utopian landscape, death is still near. But it can also mean I am also an Arcadian. The person who's buried there simply also lives in this place, Arcadia. Now, whichever way you read it, there's this, we must become aware that this, even in the idle merriment, so-called, the fun, relaxed way of life in Arcadia, even there, the shadow of death hangs, and there's this contrast between them. And then a deeper meaning that we can read is that we become aware of our own mortality, but then through the creative practice of art making, that becomes our response to this mortality. We become, or the artist becomes immortal when his paintings are still spoken about 300-400 years after his death. Okay, so here we just some little bit more background on where the idea of this particular pastoral mode, the Georgic mode, as you can see here at the bottom, there are actually these three further pastoral modes: the courtly, the religious, and then the Georgic. Now, where does this notion of the Georgics come from? So the Roman poet Virgil, he is perhaps most famous for having written the Aeneid. It's an epic poem that finishes the story of Troy and tells about the foundation of Rome. But in a previous poem that he had written before, titled the my Latin is not that great, but the eclogues. However, he introduces this idea of the pastoral, wherein he contrasts urban and rural life, and then he later writes a different poem, the Georgics, which he then actually, he was the first to set any poem in Arcadia, which you've now seen from the previous slide, this utopian place, an idealized location. So he was the pioneer of this idea, and in a further poem that he then wrote, the Georgics, it's about the agricultural, rural, peaceful community in the rural landscape. There you can see the poem that he had written, was later translated into English by the poet John Dryden. And then just there at the bottom, once again, you see these three different modes: the courtly, the religious, and then the Georgic pastoral mode. Now, okay, this is a wonderful painting by Nicolas Poussin, A Calm Day. You see there at the top, it speaks here about the Locus Amuensis. Locus means place. Locus is a place. And then Locus Amuensis, that's Latin. It's a Latin phrase. It means a pleasant place. It's a literary term that refers to some or other idealized, beautiful, perfect, safe, comfortable place. Often like we see here, a calm day, or it can be some idyllic place, some forest, maybe some woodlands. Often it's also associated with the idea of the Garden of Eden. For example, you see there it speaks about the Garden of Paradise. So such places are pleasant places, or Locus Amuensis. We see here in this painting by Poussin, we see it as a calm day. We recognize, first of all, the shepherd down here, with his herd, taking care of the animals. A little bit of a callback to the picturesque. We see a frame here of the plants, a tree that frames the setting. But then we also see this very calm lake over here. The reflection of the building, the court here in the water. This clearly is not a city. We are in the countryside somewhere, and this is somebody's villa, likely. And then if we even look to the clouds, when we get to the next slideshow on the Sublime, you'll see that often clouds can be ominous and overpowering and scary, but these clouds are not those. They are the clouds of a calm and a calm day. A more recent example by Paul Cézanne. I think we encountered Cézanne before when we spoke about the still life. Here we have a relaxed, let's call it an Arcadian scene. We have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 women taking a bath. You might remember that the theme of women taking a bath is popular. We have Paul Gauguin also painting a number of bathers. This is an example by Cézanne, and as we can just see, they are relaxed. They are in a safe place. They're comfortable. It's an ideal landscape in that way. Here we have a South African example, Maggie Loubser, South African artist, especially in the sort of expressionist line of painting. A beautiful pastoral landscape. We see the same similar, not scary cloudscape as we saw in the painting by Poussin. Here we see the rural farmhouse. In the background, there's another little one there. And then here in the foreground, we have the rural worker in the field. So the pastoral tradition celebrates the rustic, the rural, the workers in the field, the herdsman, as we've said. Here we have the harvester. These is a work by an exhibition actually by the South African artist Deborah Poynton. See quite recent examples, 2010, and she calls it Arcadia. So this landscape that you see here, as you can see, it's actually a total of 11 panels and quite large, 2 by 3 meters each one of them are. And so the landscape that we see represented here is such a Arcadian, utopian, perfect, idealized, rural landscape. And as you then walk into the gallery, you are in this space surrounded by, on 3 sides at least, by these paintings that are so life-size that in effect you then walk into this Arcadian setting. This is just one of them, one panel that you can see. A little bit of an encroachment of technology in the way of the car, but for the rest, we can call this that woodland scene that we mentioned earlier. It's untouched by man, it is green, it is lush, yet it is also safe and welcoming, and we don't feel scared to enter into this pastoral landscape. The last one I want to show you of this pastoral tradition, and let me just before I get to it once again say I've compressed these slides so there are lots more images on the pastoral tradition as well in the original slideshow. Please go through them, and if there's anything there that tickles your fancy that you want to know more about, let me know. So this is 2 works by the German artist Hans Hacker, He amongst other things, made what we could call sort of a site-specific interventions into the landscape. He comments on environment, culture, politics, these sorts of questions. And here you see in both of these, grass grows being the earlier experiment and directed growth happening some 2, 3 years, 4 years later. He literally brings the biological processes of grass growing or plants growing into the gallery space. So these physical and biological processes, we're talking here about growth, change, renewal, but also decay, right? These plants will not grow forever. At some stage, they will start to get old, and they will start decaying as well and dying. But so he brings these ideas into the gallery space. He questions these ideas that well, politics, economics, ecology, industry. These ideas are invariably bad for nature. We go into a piece of land that's untouched by man, and then the next moment there's a building standing there, right? So we are very effective in destroying nature. And Hans Hacker comments on this, and he actually brings nature and free growth, if I can call it that, back into the gallery space to show us really what we are doing to the planet. Okay, guys, move on to the slideshow on the Sublime, and I'll talk to you on the flip side.